Here are two videos you might find useful from our deck building education series. So let's go ahead and get started with our first video. In this video, I will provide you with a way that I think might be fairly easy to create an octagon-shaped deck perfectly without doing a lot of math, because you're going to be starting from a square foundation, and that is going to be the key to building this. However, you are going to have a couple of sections that are going to cantilever out, and that might require larger joists depending upon the size of the project. And in our example, we are using 2x6 decking, 2x6 joists, 2x8 fascia board, and 4x8 beams. And the overall span of our square foundation, or the beams that the joists are going to sit on, is going to be 12 feet in both directions, providing us a perfect square with 90-degree angles in each corner. And for those of you who are not familiar with some of my projects, I usually like to work backwards, and then once I get far enough into it, I will start putting everything back together in hopes of providing you with a better idea of what you're going to be doing when you start putting everything back together. And even though I don't see this very often, I like to have a foundation or a footing in the center that the joist can sit on top of without creating anything that's going to trap any water or debris. The moment that I add another framing plate to both sides, I've created a possible water and debris trap that could accumulate in here, and you don't want to have that. So again, another view of it there. Take away those joists and you can get a pretty good idea where we're going to start, along with how easy it's going to be to build something like this without any complicated math formulas. So here we have our square that is 12 foot by 12 foot, along with a straight line in two directions to pick up this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner, along with an idea that would represent these joists here. And then we're going to have another square to pick up these joists here. And as you can see, these boards here are located in the center of the 12 feet, which again makes this method extremely simple. However, I'm not about to suggest that it's simple enough to where anybody can do it. I'm not going there. So don't feel bad if you have a difficult time building this. It's a lot easier for me to build something like this on my computer. And if for whatever reason you're off just a little bit on your joist measurements, then you're just not going to have a perfect octagon. However, this doesn't mean you won't be able to build a deck with 8 sides. Now, these miter cuts are going to be 22.5 degrees and line up with this corner here. And this is going to be the first measurement that we're going to take to figure out the lengths of a couple of our other boards. So we're simply going to measure from this point here to the center. And this doesn't always mean we're going to be measuring to the corner. We're going to be measuring from the center. Keep that in mind. And this board does not need to be a full-length board. You can stop it right here in the center. And if you need to, you can always put a block underneath the center. Just don't use any blocks in any way that's going to create some type of a bowl that could end up trapping debris or water in the center. Next up, let's take a look at some of the foundation layout. And I'm not going to go over how to lay out a square foundation. I have plenty of videos at the website you can check out. And I'm not about to suggest that you need to use this layout design or something like this in the center. And you also might need to check with your local building department to make sure you can build something like this, or even an engineer. Now keep in mind that the top level of the beam is going to be the same height as the center section here with the framing plates on top. So the top of the framing plate is going to be the same height as the top of the beam. And of course, this will need to be located in the center. And to find the center, all you need to do is grab a string and attach it in both directions here to find the center so that you can measure everything and make everything perfect. So let's go ahead and take our first measurement. And if we hook over the edge here and measure to the center, we're going to have 6 feet. And if we come back 3/4 of an inch for our 1.5 inch wide joist, we will end up with 5 foot 11 1/4 inches to position the first 4 boards we're going to need to lay out the rest of the deck. And for the most part, this is probably going to be the most important part of the project, and you can see it's not that difficult. And to find the length of this board here, we just simply need to measure from the center to the corner. And this is where it could get confusing because you're going to be measuring from the center for all of these boards, even though some of them will end up being the same size. So from the corner to the center, we have 8'5" and 13/16. Same measurement that we're going to use here, and this will make a little more sense once I put the joist in. So from the center here to the corner with the 22.5-degree miter on it, we're going to use this measurement for the 8 boards we need that will line up with the corners of the fascia board. And before you do all of this, let's take a look at any anchor bolts that you might want to use, because they're going to need to be located in a good spot. And I wouldn't suggest using a large washer. I would suggest using a smaller washer or something else that you can use to attach the framing plates to the concrete. But if you can figure out where the anchor bolts are going to be located, then you won't need to notch over the anchor bolt and end up with a situation to where you might not have much of the joist bearing on top of the framing plate. And you can use 16D galvanized nails or other types of screws or nails that you feel will work outside. That is, if the deck is going to be located outside. And you can fasten all of the other joists together by in-nailing or getting a little creative with your nailing, because sometimes you are going to have to get creative to fasten all of this stuff together. And after you have installed these boards here, you can measure, cut, and install these 4 boards here, and they should be the same size. And if you have any variations in these boards here, keep in mind that you could have small variations in other sections of the project, including the installation of the fascia board. And each one of these pieces should be exactly the same. And the reason why I recommend putting the fascia board on after this is that it's usually easier to measure the next boards. Keep in mind that there are other ways to build this part of the project, and I will probably provide those in future videos. And the 2 pieces of fascia board can be connected to the joist using 16D nails again. And after you have done that, you can go ahead and install the rest of the joist. And for this right here, I would just recommend grabbing a block. This should not be larger than 14 or 15 inches. And of course, that will vary depending upon the size of the deck. And you can see here where these boards are sitting on top of the framing plate. And if for whatever reason you have a difficult time nailing these boards to the framing plate or to the other joist, then I wouldn't worry about it. Just simply let the decking that you're going to install on top secure everything together. And that might not work for your local building inspector or engineer. Keep that in mind. And of course, a view from the bottom where you can always make this footing and the framing plates longer or shorter if that's going to work better for your project. And of course, there are other methods I will be providing in other videos. And let's just go ahead and whip through a couple of different views here. And all of the joists can be toe-nailed into the beams here. And I will provide you with a view of installing some blocks here if you think that's going to work better for you. And all of these blocks and these boards here, along with this one here and this one here, should be the same. Now, if you're wondering what the angles are going to be, you got 22.5 on both sides here. And if you come off the center, this one right here is going to be 90 degrees. And these angles here, I believe, should be about 11.25 degrees. And this one here should be 90 degrees. So don't quote me on these here, and don't worry about it if you're going to cut them different. You could always come off of this one with a 90-degree angle and then cut an angle over here, if that's going to be easier for you. And for those of you who might have a difficult time installing these blocks, you can end nail through any side that you're not going to have a block covering yet, and then end nail into the joist. And then on the other side, you're simply going to nail the best you can, something like this, to where you can get a nail in through the joist and into the block there to hold it up. And again, 16D nails should work out just fine there. And then, of course, if you wanted to install some blocks here for some additional structural support, then that would look something like this. And I would imagine each block will need to be cut individually. However, if everything is laid out the same, then I wouldn't be surprised if this block and this block are exactly the same, along with this block and this block, and then this block and the one on the other side, and then this one on the other side. So not going to go out on a limb and say that it will be for sure, but from building as much stuff as I've built, that's probably going to be the case. So then you can go ahead and install your decking, and I really don't think I need to provide information on how you're going to install the decking, because that seems to be the easiest thing you can do when building a deck, even if you have mitered corners. And I'm pretty sure all of these angles will be 22.5 degrees also. Don't quote me on that. And this view should give you a pretty good idea where the decking is going to break. And that's going to be half on, or the center of this board. And of course, that would be the same board that would attach to the fascia board corners. And it looks like we have a little propeller here, but that's only going to last, boom, that's gone. And I would also recommend starting from the outside. Install the outer boards first, and then work your way in. I wouldn't recommend cutting everything at once. For example, doing this section and then this section and then this section, if you've never done it before, because most of the time you're going to be able to make small adjustments here and there if this isn't perfectly shaped to create a perfect octagon. So again, you're going to install this board, then this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and make sure that all of the measurements are the same. And if they are not, that's where you're going to have some problems. You might end up, when you get closer to here, to where the edges won't line up. However, that's not going to happen to you, because you're going to follow the instructions I provided you with in this video to make everything perfect. And I really do think this is an easier way for most do-it-yourselfers to build an octagon-shaped deck. Here is a video that I have been wanting to make for a while about building a round deck. And I have to say, I have seen a lot of different methods for framing these, and some of those methods aren't very good. And feel free to take a look at them. I think I typed round deck construction or framing into one of my favorite search engines, and I'm guessing at least 25% of them don't seem like they would work very good. And some of them are built similar to this here. They will have two beams with some cantilever joists coming across, and then who in the heck knows what they do with this section here. Now, this is the section I'm going to be focusing on in this video right here, and provide you with a few different ways to do it. Now, what I did was I took the circle that I started with on the ground and simply raised it to the top of the edge of the joist. And if we go 16 inches on center, you can see where this joist here isn't going to be supported. And you might need to do something like this. However, if you do something like this, for example, run another support beam down the middle so that you can add one or two more beams, you might be able to frame something a little better. And you can see here where this joist is now fully supported. And we're not really going to have a problem with the center joist as long as the span for the cantilever and the distance between the supporting beams works for most of the floor joist span charts. And another thing you might need to do is contact a structural engineer or your local building authorities to make sure you can even do something like this. And for this beam here, I simply cut a couple of angles on the sides and securely fastened it to the beams. And you can do that with a variety of different nails, screws, lags, building hardware, or even do something like this where I notch the bottom of the beam to provide some additional support. And of course, I'm not about to suggest this right here is an approved building method. It's just something else I came up with when I was designing this project. So again, here's an example here of something that might work. Otherwise, you might be able to do something like this, where you simply add an angled joist and then fasten some more boards to the side of that joist, something like this. And of course, I've cut everything in this video square except for a couple of joists at the very end. You can always shape the ends of the blocks to create a better connection. And even run a bolt, drill a hole through the end of the board here, and then install a nut, bolt, and a washer to create a better structural connection. And again, I'm just throwing some more ideas out here and not suggesting that you need to use any of them in this video, because the purpose of this video was to provide you with a few things that will work and a few more that might require a little more thought. Now here's something I don't see a lot of, and that would be to add a few more footings. Now in the previous example, we had 4 footings. We had 2 footings for one beam, 2 footings for another beam. However, if we add 4 more footings, I think this design right here is going to provide us with something that's going to be a little stronger and work a little better, even though it might not look like it right now. Because all of the joists from here to here are fine, but these right here don't look good. They kind of look like they're going to be teetering on the end here and not providing us with the best design. And I'm not about to suggest that this won't work for you. If you think about it, if you just move this joist back about 3 or 4 inches, you're probably going to be okay. It's going to depend upon the size of the deck or the diameter of the deck. So let's go ahead and change things up here. And I have a different design over here, another one over here, along with a row of blocks that will help us with our decking. And the decking is going to be running perpendicular to the joist, or in this direction here. So we're going to need some type of support blocks if we use this method here, along with some type of perimeter blocking around the entire deck. And I'm not going to be going into that in this video. However, if you want a little more information on that, feel free to let us know in the comment area, and I will add it to my list of videos to be made in the future. Now, the biggest problem with this right here is I have about 2 feet from this point to this point, and that might not be that big of a deal. So one method for finishing that section, and this area looks pretty good here, and for those of you who are looking to make it a little stronger, double up this joist here by adding one more and attaching it parallel to this one. And you can always install some hangers under the joist, or redesign it like this to where we're going to have 2 joists. Or you can change the angle on this one here to reposition it and kind of split the difference between this area here to where the measurement from this point to this point and this point to this point will be closer than it would be if you installed it like this over here. And of course, we could always move it back to this joist here and then double it up again and then use hangers and then run a row of blocks or 2 rows of blocks instead of installing the joist. And again, I like this design here, except I'm not 100% sold on this section here and think that we might be better off with an angled joist there to reduce the length of this section right here. And again, that would be if this is a concern to you. If you're building a smaller deck, then this might not be a problem. And in this view here, you can see where the cantilevers are nice. They're not sticking out very far and they're going back far enough. And for those of you who aren't familiar with cantilever measurements, usually 1/3 or 1/4 of the joist sticks out, and then 2/3 or 3/4 of it comes back. And I do have other videos on that. And of course, I'm going to provide you with 2 more designs here. And in this design here, we're going to have 1 joist. This one here, we're going to have 2. And the 2 joists will reduce the measurement from here to here. And again, depending upon the size of your deck will depend upon which one you're going to use. And of course, I shaped the end of this joist here, which is what you're probably going to need to do to install the curved or circular fascia board. And you can see here where the cantilever on this one is working out great. And we can install our blocks that will be helping to support the decking. And if you're looking for something a little stronger, then do something like this to reduce the distance or the span from point to point. And of course, keep in mind, I am not providing you with all of the blocking and everything else necessary to finish a deck like this. My main concern with this video is to provide you with a method that might make these decks structurally stronger. And let's go ahead and wrap the video up with a few more pictures of the decking to provide you with a reason why we're installing the blocks here. Because without these blocks, there's a good chance that the decking material is going to be overspanned. And of course, I installed some perimeter blocks here because more than likely the end of the deck will need some type of support. And I also wanted to point out that you might be able to move the span blocks to provide better nailing or to provide you with a way to create shorter spans in these areas. And here you can see where the end of the block is shaped to match the circle along with these joists here. And hopefully if you made it this far in the video, you learned a little bit more about framing these circular decks. And as always, if you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment area, and I will answer them as soon as possible.